really interesting piece in the Journal the other day from Barry Latzer, who's a professor emeritus of criminal justice at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. The post-pandemic murder wave is cresting. Some good news, bad news. The upshot of the good news is, despite the upswing in murder over the last 3 years, he writes, the chances of a long-term upswing in crime look slim. The bad news is what's happened in the last 3 years. And also interesting is what didn't happen in the last 3 years. Violent crimes were occurring less often. Murder was becoming more frequent. That's what happened. In the pre-pandemic years, fewer than 19,000 people were murdered annually. In 2020, that went to 24,000. The jump to more than 25,700 in 21. You saw a 37% increase between 2018 and 2021. 37% increase in murders. Yet, interestingly, not only did violent crimes other than homicide decline during the pandemic, domestic violence also diminished. Many thought school lockdowns, work-at-home policies would intensify domestic strife, but that's not what happened. So why was murder rising when other violent crimes were declining? The answer, writes Professor Latzer, involves big cities, guns, and young black men. In 2020, 79% of all homicides were caused by guns. Were guns involved? This is his language. And 6 out of 10 firearm homicides occurred in large metro areas. Both big cities and small and medium-sized cities saw an increase, but the increase was most pronounced in big cities. But race and age explain the rest. Again, this is his distillation of the data. Black males 25 to 54 had disturbingly high firearm death rates before the pandemic, 67 per 100,000 in 2019. 1 year later, 91 per 100,000, 36% increase. Didn't get any better in 2021. The firearm death rate for black men of all ages was 53 per 100,000, whereas for white and Hispanic males, the rates were under 10 per 100,000 for both, 1/5. And by a factor of 5, black to white and Hispanic. The data suggests that armed assaults, robberies, personal quarrels, and gang combat among young black males in big cities drove up murder rates. But since robbery and assault didn't escalate during the pandemic, again, this is national, gang wars and personal disputes were likely the principal drivers. In Chicago, 81% of all killings took black lives. In Baton Rouge, 79%. Louisville, 68%. Baltimore, 92%. It's clear the pandemic didn't generate high violent crime in general, much to counter the narrative that was promoted by these big city politicians to explain away the runaway murder and other violent crime in places like Chicago, but particularly murder, people focused on because he saw such dramatic increases. What Professor Latzer suggests is actually something that Thomas Sowell suggested a while back in his book, Black Rednecks and White Liberals, which is, like all Thomas Sowell work, must read. Professor Latzer writes, this is attributable to a subculture of violence among low-income male African Americans. A propensity to resolve interpersonal conflict through violence traces back to the 19th century South, where whites manifested similar behavior. Historians have dubbed it an honor culture. Blacks, overwhelmingly Southerners in the 19th century, adopted the white Southern subculture of violence, honor culture, quote unquote, and took it to northern cities in the Great Migration. It helps explain the elevated black-on-black violent crime rates since the start of the 20th century and even into the 21st. The combination of depolicing and the subculture of violence produced an explosion in black-on-black crime in 2020 and 2021. While the social epidemic, COVID, was damaging, the violent crime epidemic in black communities across America was devastating and continues to be, even if the murder rates are cresting. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Robert Cherry, who's a retired professor of economics at Brooklyn College and an American Enterprise Institute affiliate. He has penned a new book, The State of the Black Family, which reads not dissimilarly to the Moynihan Report from almost 60 years ago now. Professor Cherry, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, pleasure. So, I just mentioned it, the Moynihan Report in 1965 on the state of the black family, and here we are 60 years later, and you're updating it, not his report directly, but you're producing another treatise on the topic, and what's the damage assessment before we get to what needs to what can be done?
Well, what led me to write the book was that there are two driving problems within Central City black communities. One that you've described is the gun violence, and the other is the very poor performance of black 10-year-old kids. By that I mean, if you look at national measures in the largest cities, only 25 to 30% of black 10-year-olds, fourth graders, score on grade level in either math or reading. And that contributes to the gun violence that you described before. You have kids who are doing poorly and in many ways are traumatized by the gun violence in their neighborhood. There's lots of studies that show that 7, 8, 9-year-olds, when there's gun violence in their neighborhoods on it one day, the next day they're out of school, they're in school, they're upset, they don't do well. And then they have to develop a tough culture because they don't want to be picked on in their neighborhoods. And that kind of behavioral pattern of being tough leads to fights in school, leads to other disruptive behavior, so that this gun violence filters down to younger kids. And, I mean, part of the problem is that too many of the boys come from churning families. They're the son of a mother who then marries someone else and has kids with them. And boys get lost in those. It's not like Modern Family on television. Boys get lost in those situations because the new man in the house is mostly focused on his own biological kids. And, you know, a boy from the previous relationship is not served well. And so we have to do something about parenting, and much of the book, not all, but a significant part of the book goes into what can be done to improve the family dynamics for young kids in these neighborhoods.
But I mean, there's no real appetite. I mean, we haven't seen it from any politician or the political leadership of any big city. There's no real appetite for it. So, I mean,
you're right. You're perfectly right, and that's why I wrote the book. And that liberals have nothing to offer except throwing money.
And so I mean, what is the conservative alternative? I mean, are we supposed to help? Are we supposed to help black families escape the big city? I mean, it's like you just have to get them on lifeboats. I mean, forget the city.
No, there's programs that work. For example, visiting nursing programs would start with pregnant young single mothers and take them through their kid being 3 years old. These visiting nursing programs are very effective because many of these women don't come from a background where they know about parenting in a constructive way. They also, these visiting nurses help them make decisions about their own lives. So these programs they're the opposite of pre-K, which is an attempt to substitute for the family. You know, you put your kids in pre-K, and the program will do what the family should have done. That never works. But if you actually go into the family with these visiting nursing programs, and then there's programs afterwards, parents as teachers that take them up through school, and then the charter schools also engage the parents. The key thing is you have to engage the mothers in the home and get them to be the kind of parents many of them want to be. I think there are programs that they can't substitute for having a two-parent family. And particularly adolescents should be urged to take on what's called the success sequence. Yeah. First finish school,
right,
then get a job, then get married, then have a kid.
Yeah, well,
it would be great if everyone followed that success sequence.
Well, right, but those horses those horses are out of the barn. So how do you return them? How do you corral the individuals who haven't followed the success sequence, who are dominant in these communities?
Well, in my book, I have a couple of chapters on occupational programs. And by that, I don't mean becoming plumbers and electricians, because many of the kids in the schools don't have the skills. Someone told me to do air conditioning repair, you need 11th grade reading to read the manuals. So it isn't as if you can put people in college and they'll prosper. You have to have fairly basic occupational certificate programs. And they're stackable. So you get the first certificate, gets you an entry-level job. You get another certificate, helps you get promotions, etc. But we need basic occupational training for a large share of these young kids. And that's where the real struggle is, because this 4-year college for all is what's driving a lot of educational policy by liberals. It's good for me. I was a college professor. Get more students. But it's not good for a lot of these kids that fall behind.
So moving forward, where do we go from here?
Well, as I said, we need to get in the family when they're very young. We need occupational programs, basic ones like I've described, for those who have fallen behind in high school. And you obviously need a criminal justice system that takes serious fighting crime and locking up people who commit crimes.
You think the demand is there? If these we need to get into and we need to provide this, and we need to provide that, we need to offer this, we need to offer that. Is the demand there?
Well,
I mean, I ask that neutrally because we've seen with school choice programs that the demand is there. But is there evidence that the demand is there for sort of these holistic programs you're talking about?
Well, one of the infuriating or things that make me angry is if you do surveys of the black community, they want the things that I've been describing. They want charter schools. They want more police. They want services that I've described, but liberals don't like it. In the face of what that public wants, they know better. They know better. And, part of the problem is, the Republican Party has not stepped up to the plate in the way it should. So the only thing, that poor blacks, you're in Chicago, they voted for this guy for mayor who's against everything, basically, that they need and they want. But he's black, and,
Well,
that
right. This
carries day.
is what repeats itself in just about every urban center. This is why I say, it's the Republican Party has failed. It shouldn't be. It should be more aggressive on school choice. Should be more aggressive on entrepreneurism and mentoring and so. I get it, but okay. But so it's like you need a roadmap to the intersection points. So I asked myself, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to advocate for? What can I fund that I know would work and that you'd be interested in? And I don't know. I just these. I appreciate, of course, the book, and I saw Glenn Lowry, our friend from Brown University, wrote the foreword, and these are all like great thinkers. The people, the circles that you travel in, and so forth. I mentioned Thomas Sowell. There's no greater thinker, but you just still can't.
3-minute stations.
We still can't somehow bridge the gap. We still somehow can't get in or
said,
get them out.
For me, it's that the centrist Democrats have disappeared, and not enough Republicans. I mean, there are people like Mike Lee, certainly Tim Scott. There are people who are constructive on these issues, but they don't carry the day. And, I have a book there that sets out the roadmap. I mean, it doesn't have anything that reasonable people should disagree with. They're proven, but they're incremental.
Yeah.
And for the left, they don't.
No, I know it's
incrementalism.
Right. It's a revolution that we need. I understand.
That's right.
Robert Cherry, retired professor of econ at Brooklyn College. The new book, "The State of the Black Family: 60 Years of Tragedies and Failures and New Initiatives Offering Hope." The State of the Black Family. Robert Cherry, professor. Thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. And the ebook is only $10.
Okay.
Okay. State of the Black Family. Robert Cherry. Great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hi, folks. Dennis Prager here. Are you worried about investing in the stock market, especially with Joe Biden in office? Do you trust the economy? What if you could invest in a secure, collateralized portfolio with a high fixed rate of return that's not correlated to the stock market or the Fed? A portfolio where you will know what each monthly statement will look like with no surprises, your interest